It's the evening of April 14th, 1865 in Washington, D.C. The Civil War is finally winding down. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered just 5 days earlier at Appomattox Courthouse. President Abraham Lincoln is in a celebratory mood. He's planning to attend a play at Ford's Theatre with his wife Mary. It's supposed to be a night of relief and entertainment after 4 brutal years of war. Lincoln has no idea that this will be his final evening alive. Someone is plotting to kill him in one of the most audacious assassination attempts in American history. Here is how it unfolded. By the time this video is published, we've had over 150 years to piece together exactly what happened that night. But the precision of this attack, the layout of the theatre, and the split-second timing still reveal new details about how close America came to losing not just its president, but potentially its entire government. It's a warm spring evening in the nation's capital. The city is buzzing with celebration. Union soldiers are returning home. The nightmare of Civil War appears to be over. Ford's Theatre sits on 10th Street between E and F Streets northwest. It's a 3-story building, elegant for its time, with a capacity for about 1,700 people. The theatre district is alive with activity. Gas lamps illuminate the cobblestone streets. Horse-drawn carriages clatter past carrying Washington's elite to various evening entertainments. But Ford's Theatre is the crown jewel tonight. Everyone knows the president will be attending. The play scheduled for tonight is Our American Cousin, a popular comedy by British playwright Tom Taylor. Lincoln has seen it before and enjoys its humour. The president's box sits on the second level, stage right. It's actually 2 boxes, box 7 and box 8, with the partition removed to create more space for the presidential party. The box overlooks the stage from about 12 feet above the theatre floor. The presidential box is decorated specially for Lincoln's visit. Red, white, and blue bunting drapes the front of the box. 2 American flags flank the sides, and a portrait of George Washington hangs prominently in the centre. The box contains 4 chairs, a sofa, and 3 individual seats, including a special rocking chair brought in specifically for Lincoln's comfort. Lincoln arrives at Ford's Theatre around 8:30 p.m, more than an hour after the play has started. He's accompanied by his wife Mary, Major Henry Rathbone, and Rathbone's fiancée Clara Harris. Originally, General Ulysses S. Grant and his wife were supposed to join them, but they declined at the last minute, choosing instead to visit their children in New Jersey. The audience notices the president's arrival and applauds enthusiastically. The orchestra plays Hail to the Chief. Lincoln waves and takes his seat in the rocking chair positioned closest to the stage. He's clearly in good spirits, laughing at the comedy and enjoying what he believes will be a relaxing evening. What Lincoln doesn't know is that 26-year-old actor John Wilkes Booth has been planning this moment for weeks. Booth is a well-known performer, strikingly handsome, and from a famous theatrical family. His father, Junius Brutus Booth, was one of America's greatest actors, and his brothers Edwin and Junius Jr. are also accomplished performers. But John Wilkes Booth is different from his family. He's a fervent Confederate sympathizer who sees Lincoln as a tyrant destroying the South. He's been tracking Lincoln's movements obsessively, looking for the perfect opportunity to strike. He knows Ford's Theatre intimately. He's performed here dozens of times and is friendly with the staff. Take a look at what happened. Booth didn't just stumble into this opportunity. He had been part of an elaborate conspiracy to kidnap Lincoln months earlier. The original plan was to capture the president and hold him hostage to force the Union to release Confederate prisoners of war. But as the war turned decisively against the South, Booth's desperation grew. When the kidnapping plot failed, he pivoted to assassination. The plan was even more ambitious than just killing the president. Booth had recruited a small band of conspirators, each with a specific target. This wasn't just about Lincoln. It was about destroying the entire Union leadership in one coordinated strike. At the exact same time Booth planned to strike Lincoln, his co-conspirator Lewis Powell was supposed to attack Secretary of State William Seward at his home on Lafayette Square. Powell, a former Confederate soldier, was tasked with stabbing Seward to death in his bedroom. Another conspirator, George Atzerodt, a German immigrant and carriage painter, was assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at the Kirkwood House Hotel where Johnson was staying. The timing had to be perfect. All 3 attacks were scheduled for approximately 10:15 p.m. If successful, The plot would eliminate the President, Vice President, and Secretary of State simultaneously, throwing the Union government into chaos and potentially allowing the Confederacy to continue fighting or negotiate better surrender terms. But back to Ford's Theatre. Booth knows the building's layout perfectly. He understands the timing of the play. He's studied the presidential box's security arrangements, and what he's discovered is shocking by today's standards. There's supposed to be a guard posted outside Lincoln's box, but that guard, John Parker of the Metropolitan Police, has abandoned his post. Parker's dereliction of duty remains one of history's great mysteries. Some accounts suggest he went to a nearby tavern for a drink. Others claim he was watching the play from a different part of the theatre. What's certain is that when Booth approaches the presidential box, there's no one there to stop him. The presidential box has 2 doors. The outer door leads from the dress circle into a small vestibule about 4 feet wide and 8 feet long. The inner door opens directly into the box where Lincoln sits. During the afternoon, while the theatre was empty, Booth has been making his preparations. He's drilled a small peephole in the inner door and positioned a wooden bar nearby that he can use to jam the outer door once he's inside. Booth has also prepared his escape route meticulously. He's arranged for a bay mare named after a famous racehorse to be waiting in the alley behind the theatre. He's studied the theatre's back passages and knows exactly how to get from the stage to his horse as quickly as possible. It's now approaching 10:15 p.m. The play is in its 3rd act. The audience is thoroughly enjoying the comedy, completely unaware of the drama about to unfold in the presidential box above them. On stage, actor Harry Hawke is delivering one of the play's funniest lines as Asa Trenchard. "Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal, you sock-dollar-gizing old man-trap." Booth knows this line is coming. He's seen this play multiple times and has memorized its rhythm. He's timed his approach perfectly. The audience's laughter at this particular joke will be loud and sustained, long enough to mask the sound of his gunshot. Take a look at what happened. Booth climbs the stairs to the dress circle level. He's dressed impeccably in a black suit and carrying a calling card that will get him past any theatre employee who might question his presence. He approaches the outer door of the presidential box with the confidence of someone who belongs there. He's carrying a single-shot .44 caliber Derringer pistol, a small, easily concealed weapon perfect for close-range work. He's also armed with a large Rio Grande camp knife with a curved blade, ideal for fighting in close quarters if needed. In his pocket is a small brass compass, though its purpose in his plan remains unclear to historians. Booth quietly opens the outer door and steps into the small vestibule. The sounds of the play and the audience's laughter drift up from below. He can hear Lincoln's voice occasionally. The president has been commenting quietly on the action and laughing at the jokes. Now, Booth uses the wooden bar to jam the outer door shut behind him. This is crucial to his plan. Even if someone discovers what's happening, they won't be able to reach him quickly. He's bought himself precious seconds for his escape. He peeks through the small hole he had drilled in the inner door earlier that day. The view is perfect. He can see Lincoln clearly, sitting in his rocking chair, leaning forward slightly with his chin resting on his hand. His left elbow is resting on the balustrade of the box. Mary Lincoln is sitting to his right, also absorbed in the play. Major Rathbone and Clara Harris are seated further back on the small sofa. Lincoln looks relaxed and happy. After 4 years of the bloodiest war in American history, after the tremendous weight of holding the Union together, he's finally able to enjoy himself. He has no idea that death is standing just feet away. At approximately 10:15 p.m, as the audience erupts in laughter at Harry Hawke's joke, Booth quietly opens the inner door. He steps inside the presidential box, raises his small pistol, and extends his arm until the barrel is just inches from the back of Lincoln's head. He fires a single shot directly into the back of Lincoln's skull. The bullet, a round lead ball, enters behind Lincoln's left ear, passes through his brain, and lodges behind his right eye. The wound is immediately fatal, though Lincoln will cling to life for several more hours. The laughter in the theatre immediately dies. The gunshot, despite the audience's noise, is clearly audible throughout the building. Many people initially think the gunshot is part of the play. Theatres sometimes used blanks for dramatic effect. But then they see smoke drifting from the presidential box. They see Lincoln slump forward in his chair, his head falling toward his chest. Mary Lincoln's scream pierces the silence. It's a sound that will haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives, the anguished cry of a woman watching her husband die. Major Rathbone, sitting behind and to Lincoln's left, realizes what's happening and reacts with remarkable courage. Despite being in civilian clothes and unarmed, he lunges toward Booth. The assassin has anticipated this possibility. He drops his now empty pistol and pulls out his hunting knife. Booth slashes viciously at Rathbone's arm, cutting him deeply from just above the elbow almost to the shoulder. The wound is severe. It cuts through muscle and nearly reaches the bone. Blood spurts everywhere. Rathbone will survive, but he's temporarily incapacitated and in shock from blood loss. Booth doesn't hesitate. His escape plan is already in motion. He rushes to the front of the box and vaults over the railing, intending to land gracefully on the stage 12 feet below and make his dramatic exit like the accomplished actor he is. But something goes wrong. His right spur catches in the Treasury Guard flag draped over the box. Instead of landing gracefully, he crashes awkwardly to the stage, breaking the fibula bone in his left leg. The snap is audible to people in the front rows. Despite the injury and the searing pain, Booth struggles to his feet. He's now standing centre stage in front of 1,700 stunned theatregoers. According to multiple witnesses, he raises his bloody knife and shouts, "Sic semper tyrannis!" Latin for "thus always to tyrants," the state motto of Virginia. Some accounts also have him yelling, "The South is avenged." Others report that he shouted, "I have done it." What's certain is that he's making a theatrical statement, turning Lincoln's assassination into a dramatic performance with himself as the star. The audience is now in complete chaos. Some people are still confused, thinking this is somehow part of the play. Others realize they've just witnessed the assassination of the President of the United States. Screams fill the theater. People are pushing toward the exits, climbing over seats, trampling each other in their panic. But Booth isn't finished with his performance. Despite his broken leg, he limps quickly across the stage toward the back exit, where his horse is waiting. Actor Harry Hawke, still on stage, is frozen in shock. Booth pushes past him and disappears through the back door of the theatre. Meanwhile, in the presidential box, a medical crisis is unfolding. Mary Lincoln is screaming and sobbing, cradling her husband's head. Major Rathbone, despite his severe wound, is trying to help the president while blood streams down his own arm. Clara Harris is attempting to comfort Mary Lincoln while looking around desperately for help. The wooden bar jamming the outer door is preventing people from reaching the box quickly. Several men in the audience are trying to force their way in, but it takes precious minutes to break through. Dr. Charles Leal, a 23-year-old army surgeon who happened to be in the audience, finally reaches the presidential box. He's the first medical professional to examine Lincoln. What he finds is devastating. The president's wound is clearly mortal. The bullet has caused massive brain damage and is lodged deep in his skull. Lincoln is unconscious and barely breathing. His pulse is weak and irregular. Dr. Leal performs what medical procedures he can, but he knows there's no hope. In a few minutes, he's joined by Dr. Albert King and Dr. Charles Taft, both of whom confirm his grim assessment. But they can't leave Lincoln in the theatre box with the chaos continuing below. Dr. Leal makes the decision that Lincoln needs to be moved somewhere more private and comfortable for his final hours. They consider taking him back to the White House, but Leal realizes the president won't survive the carriage ride over Washington's rough cobblestone streets. Instead, they decide to carry Lincoln to the nearest suitable location. Across 10th Street, directly opposite the theatre, is a row of boarding houses. A young man named Henry Safford is standing on the steps of the Peterson House, waving and calling out, "Bring him here! Bring him here!" 6 men carefully carry the unconscious president across the street and into William Peterson's boarding house. They take him to a small back bedroom rented by William Clark, a Union soldier who's away for the evening. The bed is too short for Lincoln's 6 feet 4 inches frame, so they place him diagonally across it. Throughout the long night, a steady stream of visitors arrives at the Peterson house. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton takes effective control of the government from the small parlour. Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles arrives, followed by other cabinet members. General Henry Halleck coordinates military security for the capital. Vice President Andrew Johnson, who has survived his planned assassination when George Atzerodt lost his nerve, comes to see Lincoln but doesn't stay long. The room is small and crowded. Mary Lincoln sits by her husband's bedside, occasionally speaking to him, though he never regains consciousness. Dr. Leal remains with Lincoln throughout the night, monitoring his vital signs and doing what little he can to keep the president comfortable. Lincoln's breathing becomes increasingly laboured as the hours pass. His pulse grows weaker. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln takes his final breath. Dr. Leal closes the president's eyes and announces to the room, "Now he belongs to the ages." Secretary Stanton adds, "There lies the most perfect ruler of men the world has ever seen." The news of Lincoln's death spreads rapidly through Washington and then across the nation via telegraph. Church bells toll, flags are lowered to half-staff. The country that had been celebrating the end of the Civil War just days earlier is now plunged into mourning for its fallen leader. But what happened to John Wilkes Booth? His escape from Ford's Theatre was just the beginning of a 12-day manhunt that would become one of the largest in American history up to that time. Take a look at what happened. Despite his broken leg, Booth successfully reached his waiting horse behind the theatre. The bay mare was being held by Edmund Spangler, a stagehand at Ford's Theatre who may or may not have been part of the conspiracy. Booth mounted the horse and rode hard through the streets of Washington. He was accompanied by David Herold, the 22-year-old son of a Washington clerk who'd been recruited to guide Booth through the Maryland countryside. Herold knew the back roads and safe houses where Confederate sympathizers might hide them. They rode through the Navy Yard district and across the Navy Yard Bridge into Maryland. Astonishingly, the bridge guard let them pass, even though martial law was supposed to be in effect. Either security was incredibly lax, or Booth's charm and acting ability convinced the guard he was just a late traveller heading home. The first stop on their escape route was the home of Dr. Samuel Mudd in Charles County, Maryland. They arrived around 4 a.m. on April 15th. Dr. Mudd set Booth's broken leg and provided them with food and rest. Whether Dr. Mudd knew he was treating Lincoln's assassin remains a subject of historical debate, but he would later be convicted as a conspirator. From Dr. Mudd's farm, Booth and Herold continued south, seeking help from the network of Confederate sympathizers and former slaves who had helped smuggle people and supplies during the war. But the massive manhunt was already underway. The reward offered for Booth's capture was staggering: $100,000, equivalent to about $1.6 million today. Thousands of federal troops, detectives, and local law enforcement officers were scouring Maryland and Virginia. Telegraph lines buzzed with descriptions of the fugitives. Roadblocks were set up throughout the region. Booth and Herold spent several days hiding in swamps and forests, moving only at night. The broken leg made travel extremely difficult for Booth. They finally received help from Thomas A. Jones, a Confederate agent who hid them in a pine thicket for nearly a week, while the initial search intensity died down. On April 21st, Jones helped them cross the Potomac River into Virginia in a small boat. But instead of finding safety, they encountered more problems. Many Confederate sympathizers were afraid to help them, knowing the massive manhunt was closing in. They eventually found temporary shelter with Richard H. Garrett, a tobacco farmer near Port Royal, Virginia. Garrett initially welcomed the strangers, believing their story that they were Confederate soldiers heading home. But he became suspicious when he realized they were being pursued. On the night of April 25th, Garrett insisted that Booth and Herold sleep in his tobacco barn rather than in the house. It was a decision that would seal Booth's fate. Early on the morning of April 26, 1865, the 16th New York Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Edward Doherty, surrounded the Garrett farm. They had been following a trail of clues and informants that led them directly to the fugitives. The soldiers demanded that anyone in the barn come out and surrender. Surrender! David Herold quickly gave up, but Booth refused. "I will not be taken alive," he shouted from inside the barn. The standoff continued for several hours. Booth tried to negotiate, offering to fight the entire regiment single-handed if they would give him a fair chance. The soldiers refused. Finally, they decided to smoke him out by setting the barn on fire. As flames began to engulf the wooden structure, Booth became visible through the gaps in the barn walls. He was limping around inside, still refusing to surrender. Sergeant Boston Corbett, a deeply religious man who claimed God told him to shoot, fired his pistol through a crack in the barn wall. The bullet struck Booth in the neck, severing his spinal cord and paralysing him from the neck down. The soldiers dragged him from the burning barn and laid him on the porch of the Garrett farmhouse. For the next 3 hours, John Wilkes Booth lay dying. He asked the soldiers to lift his hands so he could see them. The paralysis had left him unable to feel anything below his neck. His last reported words were, "Tell my mother I died for my country." At 7:15 a.m. on April 26, 1865, exactly 12 days after he assassinated Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth died on the porch of a Virginia farmhouse. The other conspirators didn't escape justice. Lewis Powell had indeed attacked Secretary of State Seward, stabbing him repeatedly in his bedroom, but Seward survived his wounds. Powell was captured 3 days later when he foolishly returned to the boarding house where the conspiracy was planned. George Atzerodt, who was supposed to kill Vice President Johnson, lost his nerve and spent the evening drinking in hotel bars instead of carrying out his assignment. He was arrested within days. David Herold, who surrendered with Booth at the tobacco barn, was taken back to Washington in chains. The trial of the conspirators began in May 1865 before a military tribunal. The proceedings were controversial because civilians were being tried by military courts, but the government argued that Lincoln's assassination was an act of war. 4 conspirators, Powell, Atzerodt, Herold, and Mary Surratt, who owned the boarding house where the plot was planned, were sentenced to death and executed by hanging on July 7, 1865. Dr. Mudd and 3 other conspirators received prison sentences ranging from 6 years to life. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln changed American history in ways we're still understanding today. Lincoln's death came at the most crucial moment in the nation's history, just as the Civil War was ending and the difficult process of Reconstruction was beginning. His successor, Andrew Johnson, lacked Lincoln's political skills, moral authority, and vision for healing the nation. Many historians argue that Lincoln's assassination led to a harsher, more punitive approach to Reconstruction that created lasting racial tensions and helped set the stage for Jim Crow laws and decades of segregation. The security failures at Ford's Theatre also revolutionized presidential protection, though it would take time. The casual, almost non-existent security around Lincoln that night would be unthinkable today. A single policeman who abandoned his post was all that stood between the president and an assassin. The assassination led to more systematic protection of presidents, though it would take decades to develop truly professional Secret Service protection. Presidents continued to move about relatively freely until President William McKinley's assassination in 1901 finally convinced the government that comprehensive security was essential. Ford's Theatre itself became a symbol of national tragedy. After Lincoln's death, the federal government seized the building and forbade its use as a place of entertainment. It served as government offices and storage space for decades before being restored as a museum and working theatre in the 1960s. Today, you can visit Ford's Theatre and see the presidential box where Lincoln was shot, still decorated much as it was that night. You can walk across 10th Street to the Peterson House and stand in the small back room where Lincoln died. These sites help us understand not just what happened that night, but how a single act of violence changed the course of American history forever. The mapping of Lincoln's assassination reveals a conspiracy that could have succeeded in destroying the entire Union government. It shows us how close America came to losing its greatest president at its most crucial moment. And it reminds us that the decisions made in the aftermath of that terrible night in 1865 about justice, Reconstruction, and presidential security are still shaping our nation today.